Looking back on DuckTales Season 2, I can't help but think that it, in a lot of ways, it is an improvement over Season 1, and that's not to say Season 1 was bad. If anything, I would have to say that Season 1 was decent. The problem is, for at least for me as a viewer, as I said before, was it takes a bit of effort for me to really divorce myself from what I think the Duck universe should be, what the Disney universe should be, from the material I do like about it and always have liked about it, and then with what the 2017 series is doing. And to look at what the 2017 series is doing, you'd have to look at everything around it that Disney's doing. Namely, I would say Star versus the Forces of Evil and Gravity Falls. I think they both have a certain similar lines of comedy as DuckTales, but Gravity Falls really knows how to set up a mystery, feel as if like each episode can lead to something, and there's very little what feels like filler in one place or another. And while DuckTales doesn't, have a lot of filler, it always feels like each moment is interesting for the characters, and it feels like it will have an impact on them. It doesn't quite feel like there's a fun progression of story from one element to the next. Namely, there are things that happen that are set up in one episode. That don't really seem to come back. Like even potential story ideas are never really brought up again. Or at the very least, they're handled then in a sort of off-putting way. And I think it's because 2017 DuckTales wants to use every character it has. Every character matters. Every character is significant. Original DuckTales didn't quite do this. There'd be times when you just wouldn't see Launchpad or Gyro or Doofus for episodes. And sometimes you'd be lucky if they were mentioned. Same thing with Glomgold and Magica. They just sort of get rotated around when they're needed, where I would say the 2017 one wants to use everything. Everything at once. You don't want to go more than maybe one or two episodes without seeing a character. And that's good, that's bad. So for this video here, I wanted to really focus on my 3 least favorite episodes. And you're gonna notice a pattern. So the first one is The Ballad of Duke Baloney. Now, if you know me, just look at my DuckTales villains video, you know how I feel about Glumgold as a villain. As a matter of fact, this scene here sums up everything I like and don't like about 2017 DuckTales.
All I do is win, no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. Everybody hands go up, and they stay there, and they stay there, and they stay there.
And when I look at Glumgold, I think he's a perfect product of it too. He's a good example because he's so inconsistent with what kind of threat he is. It's like the series wants him to be the Joker of the series, but doesn't quite know what that means. Or maybe make him the Trickster. But the problem is, he's so inconsistent. I mentioned it before. He's pretty much the Ice King, but a bit more devious. And the Battle of Duke Baloney does 2 things. One, it totally strips Glomgold of any personal depth as a character. Like, his entire motivation is, I hate Scrooge. And everything in his life is about hating Scrooge. And that's not really Glomgold. Even in the original, he was still a businessman. He had adventures where he would clash with Scrooge. But Scrooge is sort of like an accident in some stories. Other times, he's my major competitor. I have to take him out because I want to be the richest duck in the world. Killing Scrooge is sort of like, if I have to, I have to. But I don't really need to. I'd rather see him ruined. Also, the Battle of Duke Baloney keeps doing something that this series is going to keep doing, which is really messing up Scrooge's history. And I'm not going with the fact that it has to be an exact retelling of Don Rose's Life of Scrooge, or even Carl Barks's Scrooge. But the problem is, I don't quite know when the struggle happens for Scrooge as a character. Like, the way the series explains it, Scrooge just sort of goes one win after win after win after win. And every version of DuckTales I've seen, or of Scrooge I've seen, has always sort of built up the idea that, yeah, it didn't happen overnight. It was a lot of work put into it. I wasn't just Scrooge McDuck, as you know me. I wasn't always clearly old as dirt. But it doesn't say it wasn't funny. And even the end sort of highlights, I think I did like how it ended, with the Scrooge and Glomwood sort of at each other's throats again, and them taking each other seriously. The problem is, this whole contest sort of means nothing until the series decides it does. And these kind of contests have happened before in DuckTales. There was the Uncrashable Hinden Tannic, there was the Scales of Macaroon, Don't Give Up the Ship. They're all sort of fun contests between Scrooge and Glumgold just to see which of them is not really so much richer, but which one's smarter, which one's better at being the richest person in the world. And I like that, and it's not quite here. Number 2 is Outlaw Scrooge McDuck. I told you notice a pattern. I told you notice a pattern. Speaks to this season though. So again, what is with Scrooge? Just being natural. This one plays it up a bit, but I would have liked if there was more of a lesson to be learned for Scrooge here, and I don't quite think it's there. It sort of reminds me of the idea that, this is more of a comedy-based series than not. Scrooge is designed to be just a really great, highly competent character, as we saw at the end of season 1 when he just arrives and he just mows through Magica. Here, while it is funny, it all felt a bit contrived. Like, I always sort of raise my eyebrow when I read, like Master of the Mississippi, and Scrooge meets who I have to assume is Gyro's father, or maybe even his grandfather. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty convenient. Sort of explains something, but it doesn't attempt to explain anything. Here, we even have Gyro meeting a version of Fenton, clearly Fenton's ancestor, and that's just weird. Goldie's also just around. Like, I'm always conflicted about the direction they took for Goldie anyway. But this episode just doesn't do it for me. Like, anything involving Scrooge's past, I tend to just not gravitate to because they don't. Let's be honest, they don't do it the way I want to do it, and it irks me as a fan. So yeah, so you can guess what my least favorite episode of this season was. That's right, Richest Duck in the World, cause Bombi the Zombie. Now, I could let the other two go. Well, maybe I couldn't let the Battle of Duke Baloney go, but I could let some stuff go. But the problem is, Bombi the Zombie is a really important character to me. He's a really important character to Don Rosa fans. He's a really important character to Carl Barks fans, I would say, too. Just because of how he appears as really like a very scary opposition. Bombi here looks like Solomon Grundy. And maybe they weren't comfortable with the origin of Bombi on any level. I wouldn't have touched this personally. I'd have said, okay, so we can't do Bombi? Maybe we can do something like Bombi, but we can't use Bombi. No, we can't. We'll use another zombie. We won't call him Bombi. This one here, So when I did my Life of Scrooge video, I really stressed how important Bombi the Zombie was. Or at least how important that chapter was when he was introduced. The fact that he is not a warning to Scrooge that he is the richest duck in the world, but that in fact he represents the lowest point of Scrooge McDuck's life. The lowest point of his character is sort of personified in Bombi the Zombie. And he sort of cheats his way out of it, but it leaves an impact on him to be a better person. One of the things that contributes to him being a better person. And in a lot of ways, it's sort of up the maturity of the story. Because Scrooge already realized, oh, I've done a bad thing. I need to go make up for it. But when Bombi shows up, the damage has been done, you can't undo that. No amount of apologizing is going to fix what you've done. It's a really great story. And here is oh, no one deserves to be this rich, or no one really is the richest duck in the world, and the Louis plot it just doesn't do it for me. So yeah, that's why I had to make this video a bit separate, because it really is, this is just me fanboy wanking. This is just me being upset as a fanboy. And honestly, I will give the season credit, because if the only thing I didn't like about the season, outside of some tonal problems, is the fact that my fanboy nerdism has not been sated, which it probably was never going to be, it's fine. But I didn't want it to taint the actual review I'm going to do. So, you know what? We'll bring it to an end here. What do you guys think of these 3 episodes here? You can sort of guess my issues here. But anyway, I'll bring the video to a close here. Check out my other videos, and I'll catch you all later. This is Bucket Think Tank signing off. Thanks for watching. As always, may your fandom serve you well.